Thank you, Laska Hirlach. Minister, just when will that paper then around the cost of third level education be produced? You might just let us know. But I want to talk to you in relation to SUSI and the supports for students and parents with the cost of living crisis. That's making particular reference to the 25% increase to the SUSI recommended in the recent published SUSI review, and any plans you have to reduce fees for the upcoming academic year. I sincerely welcome your recognition that fees are at the current level are an austerity measure that cannot continue. So could you just elaborate on that, Minister?
Yeah, thanks, Deputy. When will you be publishing the paper? The honest answer is in advance of the budget. I'll get you a more specific answer than that, but in enough time for you in terms of your own alternative budget or pre-budget submissions and myself to begin to grapple and discuss these issues. So one would imagine in the autumn, but I'll get you a more specific time. We truthfully haven't decided yet, but I'll come back to you on that. Look, addressing the cost of education for students and families is a priority for me. Cost cannot be a barrier for working families in terms of getting their children into college, and that's why I did commission a review of the student grant scheme when I took up office. This was published on the 4th of May. The review involved wide stakeholder engagement, a very extensive consultation with students and research into the costs of higher education. And the review identifies a number of issues, including the rising costs affecting students over the past decade, the fact that income thresholds for eligibility in the scheme have not kept pace with the rise of earnings over the same period, and particular costs, and you'll know this well from your own constituency, for those who travel long distances to their place of education, and the costs associated with postgraduate study also. Now, we have taken some steps already to try and alleviate financial pressures which help to tackle issues raised in the student grant review. So we have seen the increase in the grant payment for all those in receipt of a maintenance grant by €200 from September. We have increased the qualifying threshold by €1,000 to bring more people into the grant scheme. We have, importantly, and this was I think the most important change, we've changed the qualifying distance for the non-adjacent rate of grants to help students who live further away from college. We have increased the postgraduate fee grant from €2,000 to €3,500, and we've also increased the postgraduate fee grant income threshold. So all of these are very much in line and a beginning or a commencement of the implementation of the student grant review. I have, as I've said, committed to publishing an annual cost of education paper, which will set out the range of options to address costs, including changes to both the student grant scheme and the student contribution scheme. This will seek to inform decision-making at budget time regarding what further measures we can take to continue to support students and their families. Last year we received a package of, I think, about €30 million from my memory to invest in additional student supports. We largely put that into the SUSI grant scheme. I'm expecting we will receive another package or pot of funding this year for student supports, and we will grapple and discuss in this House and elsewhere how best to spend that in a way that supports students and families.
I think what it is, Minister, is that the students and their families almost have announcement fatigue at this stage, because things are announced over and over again, and yet they know how much money they have in their pocket or their household budget, because they're facing a cost of living crisis. And some of it indeed has been driven by international events, though the SUSI review highlights the greatest burden comes from the housing crisis and the cost of rent, a domestic crisis. The SUSI review says there needs to be a 25% increase in the maintenance grant, which is far more than the planned €200 increase. The entire planned increase to the student maintenance grant of €200 announced last October for this September will be completely eaten up by inflation before students even see it. So that's why I'm calling on you, Minister, at the time, I called on you at the time to bring the increase into effect immediately to help ease the burden, as inflation was already putting real pressure onto families. You refused to take that practical step, but this was supposed to be a small step towards taking SUSI out of the austerity mode. But now with inflation at 6.7 or above, students will be worse off in real terms come this September, despite the increase. Students are really, really anxious, and families, about what's going to happen this September, Minister.
I want to thank the Deputy. I mean, the SUSI grant review is an extremely important piece of work. It now provides us with absolute clarity as to the key issues that students and that other stakeholders wish to see us address in terms of better supporting students and their families in this country. We've already, even in advance of publishing it, we had begun to make progress on those recommendations. Very significant reduction to the to the distance criteria. That means that an awful lot of students, by the way, will qualify for a lot more than an extra €200 in their grant. Some students will actually see their grant rise by over 25% as a result of that change, particularly students, I'd suggest, living in rural and provincial Ireland and travelling quite a lot of distance to get to college. We have begun to cost the measures of implementing the scheme. I'm happy to share with the Deputy, which I'm sure will be useful for her own work, that if we were to go ahead and increase the level of the student grant, an increase of 25% from the 2021 maintenance rates, which is recommended in the review, that's a cost of €43.6 million. So, I mean, I genuinely believe that the findings and recommendations in the student grant scheme are deliverable. Are all of them deliverable in 1 year or one budget? They're not. They're simply not. But can we make significant progress in the forthcoming budget, and can, in the lifetime of this government, can we get through an awful lot of those recommendations and make a real and substantial difference? I believe we can.
Yeah, Minister, I would again just ask you to do everything that we possibly can, because, you know, I hear your sentiments in terms of not blocking children or not blocking students out of education, and I'm fearful at the moment that their choices will be greatly reduced. They'll be greatly reduced because of the high cost of accommodation and the high cost of them accessing third level education, but also the need for them then to work while they're also trying to study, and what that will do in terms of the outcomes for students. So we really need to concentrate the minds. Inflation is now at 6.7%. We see in Britain it's gone to 9%. I would not at all be surprised, but we're in double-digit inflation by the end of this year. The severe impact of that cannot be underestimated, and particularly for families, and families who have maybe 2 or 3 students going to college and some going to secondary school as well. So we really need to all collectively, and we will work with you as opposition to do everything that's possible to alleviate that burden on students and on families.
Minister.
Thank you, Deputy, and I'll certainly work with you and others in this House on that also. I do just want to say, in terms of a bit of context, so it is important to note we do live in a country where more than 4 out of 10 students do receive student grants, where more than 4 out of 10 students don't pay the €3,000 registration fee. I always say that because I often worry if a student is listening in a secondary school wondering can they go to college. It is important people know that 40% more, about 42% of students do receive financial assistance in terms of the registration fee. We have taken other measures, though, that do benefit students. I think one of the most significant measures was brought in by my colleague Minister Ryan in terms of the reduction in public transport costs. Yes, a reduction for the population at large, but a 50% reduction for people under the age of 24, many of them who will be students. So I think we're definitely agreed on the need to do more. I think we're agreed that Budget 2023 will need to do more, and I certainly will work with you in this House to do that and to advocate across government for that to happen.
Thank you.